What if I told you that right now you could be trusting someone who is systematically driving you crazy and you don't even realize it? Not because you're naive, not because you're stupid, but because your brain is working against you. Because it's wired to question itself rather than admit that someone it trusts is lying. This is called gaslighting. And it's one of the most dangerous psychological mechanisms one person can use against another. Not because it's loud, not because it's obvious, but because it's quiet, invisible, and because it comes from within, from your own mind. Today, I'm going to show you what gaslighting really is, how it works in your brain, why it's so hard to recognize, and most importantly, how to stop it. Once you understand how this mechanism works, you'll never see reality the same way again. Section 1. What is gaslighting really? The term comes from a 1938 planned later from a 1944 film based on it. The film is called Gaslight. In it, a man systematically manipulates his wife by dimming the gas lights in their house, and then telling her she's imagining it. He alters the reality around her while simultaneously convincing her that she's going crazy. Think about it. He's not just changing the outside world, he's changing her inner world, her perception, her confidence in herself. That's what gaslighting is. It's not a single lie. It's not a one-off conflict. It's a systematic, ongoing process in which one person deliberately undermines another person's perception of reality. What if I told you that gaslighting doesn't just happen in romantic relationships? It happens between parents and children, between bosses and employees, between friends, between siblings. Anywhere power and trust collide, gaslighting can occur. And the frightening thing is this: the person who engages in gaslighting isn't always aware of what they're doing. Sometimes it's a cold, calculating strategy. But sometimes it's a deeply ingrained pattern that stems from their own history, from their own wounds, from their own survival strategies. That makes it even more complicated. Because how do you recognize something that sometimes not even the perpetrator recognizes? Your brain tricks you. And I mean that quite literally. When we trust someone truly trusts them, our brain switches off a certain critical filter. It would be evolutionarily pointless to be constantly suspicious of everyone. So we've developed a system where trust means I don't have to question everything. This person is safe. What they say is probably true. Gaslighting exploits precisely this filter. Section 2. How gaslighting works in your brain. To understand why gaslighting is so effective, we need to briefly understand how your brain constructs reality. Your brain doesn't simply perceive the world as it is. It actively constructs it. It takes in information from the outside, what you see, hear, and feel, and combines it with previously stored expectations, memories, and beliefs. The result is your subjective reality. What if I told you that this constructed reality is frighteningly easy to manipulate? There's a psychological concept called cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance describes the state that arises when two opposing beliefs exist simultaneously in your mind. For example, you believe your partner loves you. At the same time, your partner is doing something that doesn't feel like love. These two pieces of information don't add up, and that creates an uncomfortable state of tension in your brain. Your brain hates this state. It wants to resolve it. And the easiest way to resolve it isn't to question the other person, but to question yourself. Maybe I misperceived it. Maybe I'm being too sensitive. Maybe I'm imagining it. Gaslighting exploits precisely this mechanism. The gaslighter actively provides you with the tools your brain uses to sabotage itself. Then there's the so-called confirmation bias. Your brain actively seeks out information that confirms what it already believes. If you believe you're overly sensitive because someone keeps telling you so, your brain will start finding evidence for it everywhere. It filters out anything that contradicts this belief and reinforces what confirms it. Think about it. You literally become complicit in your own manipulation. And then there's the effect of isolation on the brain. When a gaslighter slowly isolates you from friends and family, which happens very often, you lose the outside perspective. You no longer have a mirror, no one to tell you, hey, what you're describing doesn't sound normal. And without that mirror, your brain has nothing but the gaslighter's words to calibrate reality. That's when it gets really dangerous. Section 3. Why we find gaslighting so hard to recognize. There's a question almost everyone asks when they first truly understand what gaslighting is. Why don't you just notice it? The answer is both simple and terrifying, because from the inside, it doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like your own perception, like your own weakness, like your own failure. Let me explain this in more detail. Gaslighting almost never happens as a single, clear-cut incident. It's a process. It starts with small things, with a slight doubt here, with a subtle reinterpretation there, with a sentence that sounds harmless but carries a very specific message. What if I told you that the most common gaslighting phrases are precisely the ones that sound caring? I'm worried about you. You've been forgetting so much lately. You're just so sensitive. I say that because I love you. I never said it like that. You always twist things. You're overreacting again. I don't know why you take everything so seriously. Each of these sentences, on its own in a different context, said just once might be harmless. But when these sentences come up again and again, when they repeat themselves, when they become a pattern, then they build up in your mind like layers of sediment. And the insidious thing is, your brain doesn't store memories like a computer. It doesn't store them as immutable files. Memories are malleable. They can be influenced. They can be overwritten. There are studies that show people can develop false memory snot because their memory is defective, but because the brain actively fills in the gaps with what seems most plausible. If someone tells you often enough that you remembered something incorrectly, your brain will eventually start storing that version. This is called memory distortion, and gaslighters use this intuitively. Think about it. If someone tells you often enough that you didn't perceive something correctly, not just once, but dozens of times over months or years, your brain will eventually start to distrust itself. Not the other person, it's itself. That's the core of gaslighting. The moment you stop trusting yourself, and then there's another mechanism that makes the whole thing even more complicated: intermittent reinforcement. This is a concept from behavioral psychology. It describes what happens when positive and negative experiences alternate unpredictably. Imagine this. Some days, this person is wonderful, loving, attentive, understanding, and other days they're cold, dismissive, manipulative. You never know which version to expect. What does your brain do in this situation? It gets addicted. Really, the unpredictability activates the dopamine system in a similar way to gambling. Every positive experience is felt more intensely because it's unpredictable, and your brain starts searching for that positive experience. It perseveres, it explains away the negative. It hopes this isn't a sign of weakness. This is neurobiology. For the stages of gaslighting. Gaslighting doesn't develop overnight. I think there are recognizable stages that almost always follow the same sequence. Knowing these stages will help you recognize them in yourself or in someone you care about. The first stage is called idealization. At the beginning, everything is perfect. The person who later gaslights is often overwhelmingly positive at first. Attentive, charming, intense. You feel seen, understood, special. Psychologists call this love-bombing flood of affection that creates a strong emotional bond. This bond is the foundation upon which everything else is built. You'll always want to relive this first phase, and that's precisely what makes you vulnerable. The second phase is that of initial doubts. Small incidents begin to surface. Minor reinterpretations, little lies disguised as misunderstandings. You sense something, but you don't yet fully trust what you sense. You doubt, you excuse, you explain the other person's behavior to yourself. What? If I told you that this moment, this first doubt, is the crucial moment, not because you can avoid it, but because you are in this moment. You can start observing in a moment, instead of immediately explaining. The third phase is systematic dismantling. Now the tactics become more direct, the sentences more frequent. The person actively begins to question your memories, your perceptions, your reactions. You are portrayed as too sensitive, immature, and unstable. At the same time, your social circle shrinks. Perhaps friends are spoken of negatively. Perhaps family relationships are weakened. Very gently, very slowly. The fourth phase is that of complete dependence. You hardly trust yourself anymore. Ask the other person for advice before almost every decision because you're afraid of being wrong again. Your self-esteem is at rock bottom. You're ashamed of things that other people consider normal. You apologize reflexively, even when you haven't done anything wrong. Think about it. You're no longer the same person you were at the beginning. Not because you've changed, but because someone else has systematically changed you. Section 5. Typical. Tactics. How to recognize them. There are certain patterns, certain linguistic and behavioral tactics that repeatedly appear in gaslighting. I'll tell you about the most common ones. The first tactic is outright denial. I never said that. That never happened. This tactic is simple but frighteningly effective. Because when someone you trust directly denies something, it immediately creates the cognitive dissonance we've been talking about. Your brain starts to doubt. The second tactic is distraction. When you bring up a problem, the topic is suddenly changed. You wanted to talk about your feelings, now you're talking about a mistake you made 3 weeks ago. The topic shifts. The actual conflict remains unresolved. You leave the conversation exhausted without knowing why. The third tactic is downplaying and belittling. Your reactions are portrayed as exaggerated. You're being so dramatic. You're making a mountain out of a molehill. Why can't you just relax? These phrases serve a very precise function. They make you believe that the problem isn't the situation, but your reaction to it. Not what happened, but how you reacted to it. The fourth tactic is reframing concern as weakness. If you react emotionally, if you cry, if you get angry, if you show fear, it will be used against you. Do you see how unstable you are? I'm really worried about you. These words sound caring, but their function is to destabilize you. The fifth tactic is triangulation. This means introducing a third person into the conflict. Even name thinks you're overreacting. Everyone says you're difficult. This third person can be real or imagined. Their function is to further isolate you and amplify your self-doubt. What if I told you that you might recognize one or more of these tactics right now in your own past or present? Think about it. Section 6. The difference between gaslighting and normal conflicts. Before we get to the solutions, it's important to answer a question many people have. How is gaslighting different from a normal argument, from a normal misunderstanding, from two people simply perceiving the same situation? Differently? That's a fair question. And the answer lies not in the individual incident, but in the pattern. In a normal conflict between two people, both can offer their perspective. Both feel heard. There's an effort to understand each other, even if it's difficult. After the conversation, neither may feel like a winner, but both feel seen. With gaslighting, it's different. You leave conversations wondering what just happened. You're confused, you feel ashamed, you think you did something wrong without really knowing what. There's no resolution, just more questions. Another distinguishing feature is consistency. Gaslighting isn't an isolated incident, it's a pattern. If you notice that you repeatedly doubt your own perceptions in a particular relationship, constantly feel like you're wrong, and repeatedly apologize without knowing why, that's a signal. Section 7. How to protect and free yourself. Now we come to the part you've probably been waiting for. What can you do? I'm going to give you concrete tools, not as a promise that it will be easy, but as guidance. As a compass, so you know which direction to go. The first tool is keeping a journal. Write down what happens. Not the next day, asterisk immediately. Afterward, write down what was said, what you felt, what the situation was like. This journal serves a dual purpose. First, it provides you with an external memory outside your own mind that cannot be manipulated. Second, it begins to reveal patterns that may be invisible at the moment. The second tool is an outside perspective. Actively seek out conversations with people you trust, people who are not part of the situation. Tell them what happened as objectively and concretely as possible, not to seek validation, but to have a mirror not controlled by the other person. The third tool is trusting your body. Gaslighting happens in the mind, but the body often registers the truth before the mind. If you feel exhausted after certain conversations, if your stomach clenches in certain situations, if you experience a particular feeling of unable to take it seriously, your body doesn't lie. The fourth tool is setting clear boundaries and observing how the other person reacts. A person who respects you will respect your boundaries even if they don't understand them. A gaslighting person will respond to your boundaries with aggression, guilt, or further manipulation. This reaction is often the clearest answer. You can get that. The fifth tool is professional help. I say this very deliberately. Gaslighting leaves its mark. It leaves marks on your self-image, your confidence, your ability to calibrate reality. These marks take time and often professional guidance to heal. This is not a sign of weakness. This is a sign of self-respect. What if I told you that the act of seeking help is already an act of reclaiming your own reality? The sixth tool is understanding that you don't have to change to be safe. Gaslighting creates the belief that you are the problem, that you have to change so the other person will stop behaving that way. That's a lie. Gaslighting is a choice made by the gaslighter, conscious or unconscious. It's not the result of your mistakes. Think about it. Section 8. What happens inside you when you leave a gaslighting relationship? Many people believe that the hardest part is recognizing gaslighting. Okay, but for many, the hardest part is what comes after. When you leave a relationship where you were gaslighted, when you begin to set boundaries, you might expect relief. And yes, relief comes. But it often comes with something that feels contradictory. You may feel guilty. You may miss the other person. You may ask yourself questions like, was it really that bad? Did I overreact? You may experience a deep sense of emptiness. That's normal. That's not a regression. That's your brain trying to recalibrate a state that has been miscalibrated for a long time. Neuroscience shows that intense emotional bonds, even toxic ones, leave similar neural patterns. 2. Addiction patterns. The brain has become accustomed to this relationship. It misses it on a biological level, even if you know it has harmed you. This means you need time. You need patience with yourself. And you need people and perhaps professional support to help you go through this recalibration. Your brain is tricking you here too. But knowing this allows you to deal with these impulses more consciously. Section 9. Can someone gaslight without knowing it? I want to address a question that may be uncomfortable but is important. Yes, gaslighting can happen unconsciously. This doesn't mean it's any less harmful. It doesn't mean you have to tolerate it. But it does change how you deal with it. Some people who gaslight do so because they experienced it themselves, because their own reality was repeatedly challenged in childhood, because they've learned that controlling someone else's reality is a survival mechanism that doesn't make them victims you're responsible for, but it does make the situation more humanly complex. What if I told you that understanding this mechanism both in the other person and in yourself is the first step to truly becoming free? Recognizing gaslighting doesn't automatically mean condemnation. It means clarity. And clarity is the prerequisite for any decision you can make from this point on. Section 10. The difference between recognizing and acting. There's one last point I want to address before we wrap up. No knowledge doesn't automatically protect you. You can know everything about gaslighting, every tactic, every psychological mechanism, every stage, and still find yourself in a situation that's hard to escape. That's not because you're weak. It's because gaslighting taps into deep emotional and biological mechanisms. Knowledge is the first step, but the second step is action, and the third step is support. No one overcomes the effects of gaslighting completely alone, not because it's impossible, but because you can't use the damaged tool, your own trust in your perception, while it's both damaged and completely intact. Think about it. If your compass has been miscalibrated, you need an external reference point to recalibrate it. You're not alone in this. It's human. It's biology. Soothes your brain using gaslighting against you. If you're experiencing it yourself, yes. But the crucial trick is this. When you understand the mechanism, it loses its power. Not completely, not immediately. But slowly, layer by layer, you begin to find yourself again. You have to learn to trust your own perception again. This isn't a small step. It's the most important step you can take, and you can take it